Hi, this is Tom Soane, and I've got to give you my opinion on this and have a bit of a rant actually about the support for landlords, or the lack of support for landlords throughout this entire lockdown COVID-19 pandemic that we're all going through together, and we're all suffering through in one way or another. Everybody is suffering somehow because of lockdown and COVID-19. And I do think landlords have been neglected through this whole time. So I've got a solution. I've got an idea on how the government could actually support landlords throughout this whole period of time without changing anything. Actually, by just continuing to do what they're already doing. And if you support the landlords, you support the tenants. If you support the tenants, you support the economy. It's just basic economics. So I wanted to share that idea with you. I wanted to have a bit of a rant about it too. I don't know why, I just fancy a rant. And I want to get your feedback on my idea. I want to find out what you think about my idea and also what ideas you might have too. And look, if you are suffering as a landlord throughout this whole pandemic, then let me know. I might be able to help you. But anyway, look, I do think landlords have been neglected throughout this whole period of time, or overlooked. And I don't think that's intentional. Because look, in the general public, there is a bit of a misconception or a bit of a stereotype that all landlords are loaded and swimming in cash. You know, we're all Scrooge McDucks diving into our massive pot of gold coins every night, which would be bloody painful, by the way. I wouldn't like to do that. But, you know, and if a tenant can't pay our rent, then it doesn't matter because we've got loads of money. We don't need it. Well, it's just not true. And actually, if you listened to my podcast a couple of weeks ago now, which I went into quite a lot of detail about how much money landlords actually make. And when you consider that most of the landlords in this country only have one rental property, you'll realise that no, landlords aren't actually typically loaded. Actually, it's just a little bit of extra income for most people. But there is that misconception, so maybe that plays a part. So if you're listening to this and you're not a landlord, or you're a tenant, or you're just not a landlord, you want to get into property or whatever, then have a real think about that, because landlords are not automatically loaded. That is a stereotype, a misconception. But also, I do think that landlords have been categorised or pigeonholed, if you like, in between a business and a regular person. So therefore, the support for landlords has been very much lacking because there is no category for them in the current climate. There's no facility for them to be part of either a business or a resident. So if you are a landlord and you own property and your tenants can't pay their rent, that is a loss of income for you. But because you have that as an asset, and you maybe have that would go down on paper as an income, then you won't get the same support as people that don't have property and don't have investments, don't have anything else, which I think is the wrong way to look at it. It's the same way the other side. Technically, a landlord is a business. Now let's think of the fundamental thing, or let's think of the fundamentals of a business. What is an actual business? Well, a business is nothing more than a vehicle that buys a product at one price and sells it for a higher price. That is a business. Now, it doesn't matter whether you're providing a service, selling a product, or whatever. You are buying that service at one price, whether that be an employee's time or systems or something like that, and you're selling it at a higher price. Or if you're a product seller, you are buying a product at a price and you are selling it for a higher price. Or you might be buying the materials for a product at a price and then making that product and selling that product at a higher price. One way or another, you are purchasing something at a price and selling it to somebody at a higher price. That is a business. And it's the same with a landlord. A landlord has purchased a property and they continue to rent that property or continue to own that property at a price. So if you've got a property with a mortgage on it, you pay your mortgage, that's fine. And then you rent it to a tenant who is your customer at a higher price. It's as simple as that. You are a business. But I don't think landlords are going to be categorized into a business. So therefore, they're not going to get the same support that businesses get. Now, at the moment, during this whole lockdown period, businesses have been very well supported, I think. Actually, it's one of the things I commend the government for. Whether you agree with this or not, it's up to you. But I really commend the government for the way they've supported business. Now, there are other things that I think the government have made a mistake with. But I would also hate to be the person that has to get the country through this. I think that's a terrible situation to be in. There's never going to be a 100% right or wrong. You know, I hear some people criticizing the way that the government have handled the lockdown. You know what? I can't really criticize it because I would think, well, could I do any better? I don't know. You're only going to do the best you can with the information you've got, and you're only going to do what feels right to you at that time, and everybody is the same. So look, the government did actually provide a lot of support for businesses. And so a couple of the ways they did that. Number one was a bounce back loan. Now that was a loan provided by the government, backed by the government, which was up to 50 grand, which all businesses were entitled to, subject to some small application. And that bounce back loan was to enable businesses to come back and start trading and continue their businesses from this lockdown period. And that was a very helpful facility provided by the government. There is also a similar type of loan called I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it's like the business interruption loan or the continuing business interruption loan, something like that. And that was up to 250 grand. And both of those loan facilities were designed to be able to help businesses either continue trading or come back from this lockdown closure and start trading again. Because if our businesses get going, then our economy gets going, because they all pay billions into our economy. If they're not trading and they're not working, then the economy just stops and dies, and then we're all fucked. But look, so those facilities were provided by the government to businesses, amongst other things. Look, there was also some grants and some other different types of facility. Furlough scheme. Furlough scheme is another way that they supported businesses. Brilliant. Now, that cost the government a fortune and we're all going to pay it back, fine. But we're all going to pay it back anyway. But what I'm saying is that those facilities were offered to businesses. And a landlord technically is a business. Now, wait, before you scream at me and say, no, landlords shouldn't be entitled to 250 grand. I agree. No landlord needs 250 grand. No landlord needs 50 grand, really, if it's a case of tenants just not being able to pay rent. However, government, you've designed that facility already. It's in place. So why not just vary the amount? You've done it already. You've set some sort of criteria in place for businesses where you can't borrow more than, I think it's 25% of your revenue. Okay, great. Do the same thing, but incorporate landlords into that business category. So if you're a landlord, for an example, and you've got, I don't know, your tenants are paying you £750, actually that's a terrible figure to use, and your rent is £1,000 a month, let's just say, and your tenants can't pay that rent, then you should be able to apply for one of those business facilities which will cover that rent. Now, we're not talking about a phenomenal amount of money in relation to what the businesses are able to borrow. But think of it like this. If you support that landlord and the tenant cannot pay the rent, so the landlord therefore can claim that facility from the government and pay their own mortgage, pay their own bills, pay their own insurance, pay for their own maintenance of that property, then you are also helping and supporting the tenants. Think of it, worst case scenario, if the tenant doesn't pay the rent and the landlord can't pay their mortgage and the landlord can't pay for things to be fixed because they've got no money and the landlord can't pay their insurances because they've got no money, then surely By supporting the landlord, you are also helping protect the tenant. Because that tenant might have also been made redundant, let go. The company they're working for may have closed down. They might not be able to work or earn money. Think of all the taxi drivers that for that huge amount of time couldn't work. Think of all the pub workers that couldn't work. All of those sorts of people might be in a situation where they can't pay their rent. So government, you have the ability to help them out. And by helping the landlord, you're going to help the tenants. And by doing that, you're going to protect the tenants. You've gone to this major length in with eviction bans and all of that sort of stuff, which again, I get it. I understand. Doesn't matter whether I agree with it or not. It's in place and I understand why you did that. Government, I'm talking to you like you're one person. But you have to help those tenants and you have to help those landlords. And you can do the both at the same time. Now, look, I accept that there are tenants that have used this opportunity to squeeze a few quid out of the landlords. And I detest that. I hate bad tenants. I hate them as a core person, bad tenants. But I'm not talking about bad tenants. I'm talking about the tenants that have had issues because of lockdown through their employment and income. That's caused problems for them. Those are the tenants that we need to help, and those are the landlords that we need to help. Because remember, landlords are going to have mortgages and outgoings and insurances and management fees and maintenance costs, because we still got to keep that tenant safe. It doesn't matter whether the tenant hasn't paid their rent. If something goes wrong with that boiler, the landlord still has to pay for that to be fixed. So there has to be some support. And like I say, the government have already got this facility in place. So why not just make a small variation to that existing facility and incorporate landlords into it? That's my idea. So I really want to get your feedback on that. I don't think it would be a major thing to do, but I do think we have to treat landlords as businesses. They pay tax just like a business on all of that revenue they generate. Because now they can't landlords can't claim their mortgage payments for tax relief. So technically, you know what? We are paying the same sort of tax as a business. We're operating in the same way as a business. We have expenditure like a business, and we make revenue and profit, hopefully, like a business. So therefore, we are a business. So if you are a landlord and you don't own your properties or properties by through a limited company and you own it all in your own personal name, then what do you think? Now, I've got a bit of both. I want all of my companies, all properties that I purchase, I want them to be in a limited company name. It's better for me, better for tax for me. So that's the way I do it. And you know what? I'm happy to talk to you about the pros and cons if anybody wants to do that. But for the time being, let's get these landlords supported. Let's help them out. So how can we do that? Look, I've never really lobbied anything. I've never been to the government and lobbied to try and get something through. So I think the first thing that I should do is talk to the local MP, right? So maybe we should do that. Hey, who's up for it? Who's going to help me? Which landlords need help? If you know a landlord that needs help, connect them up with me, because I'm going to do something about it. But look, I really do want to get your thoughts on all of this. And if you've got a situation where you've had issues with your tenants throughout this lockdown period, then I'd like to hear from you. Maybe we can try and work together and solve those issues. There are always ways out. There's ways and means. But I'd love it if the government could incorporate landlords into business support. Right, let's leave it at that. So hopefully you can all become better versions of yourself. And if you want to be the best version of yourself at one thing, then you've got to be the best version of yourself at everything. What does that mean? Well, it just means that if you want to be great in life, you can't just focus on one thing. You have to improve everything in your life. So be the best version of yourself at one thing, be the best version of yourself at everything. Now, join me. If you're in your car driving along, join me and say it out loud. My name's Tom Soane, and this is the Anonymous Landlord.